The words hung in the air, like a fragile thread, ready to snap under the weight of whatever secret she was carrying. I stood there in the sterile hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like distant thunder, my heart pounding in my chest as if it knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. The nurse had called me just an hour ago, her voice clipped and professional. "Mrs. Harlan, your daughter Lily has been admitted. She's stable, but you should come right away." No details, just that urgency that makes a mother's blood run cold. I rushed through the evening traffic, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The rain was coming down in sheets, blurring the windshield, mirroring the fog in my mind. Lily, my sweet, headstrong girl of 22. What could have happened? She was supposed to be at her part-time job at the bookstore downtown, not here in this place that smelled of antiseptic and quiet despair. When I finally pushed through the door to her room, there she was, propped up in the bed, her face pale against the crisp white sheets. A bandage wrapped around her forehead and an IV drip snaked into her arm. Her eyes, those deep brown ones she'd inherited from her father, widened when she saw me. She glanced at the door behind me as if expecting someone else to follow. "Mom," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper, cracked like dry leaves underfoot. She reached out a hand, trembling slightly, and I took it, feeling the chill in her fingers. "Don't tell Dad I'm here. Please, promise me." I froze, the room seeming to tilt for a moment. "Lily, what on earth? What happened? The nurse said something about a car accident?" She nodded weakly, wincing as she shifted. "It was minor. I swerved to avoid a deer on the back road near the old mill. Banged my head, sprained my wrist. But Mom, just don't tell him. Not yet." Her plea was so earnest, so laced with fear that I couldn't press her right then. I sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing her hair back like I did when she was little and had scraped her knee playing in the yard. But this wasn't a scrape. This was something deeper, something that made her eyes dart away from mine. I nodded, swallowing the questions bubbling up. "All right, sweetheart. I promise. For now." The doctor came in shortly after, a kind-faced man with glasses perched on his nose. He explained the details. Concussion, minor lacerations, observation overnight. Nothing life-threatening, thank God. But as he spoke, I watched Lily's face, the way her jaw tightened, the subtle shift in her posture. She was holding back, and it tore at me. That night, as I drove home alone, the rain still pattering against the car roof, I replayed her words over and over. "Don't tell Dad." Tom and Lily had always been close. Daddy's girl through and through. What could have changed that? I pulled into our driveway, the house lights warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold knot in my stomach. Tom was in the living room, his reading glasses on, flipping through the evening paper. Our son, Mike, 18 and all legs, was sprawled on the couch with his phone. "Everything okay, Sarah?" Tom asked, looking up with that easy smile of his. "You were gone longer than I thought." I forced a smile back, hanging my coat by the door. The scent of the pot roast I'd left simmering in the slow cooker filled the air, comforting and familiar. "Oh, just stopped by the store for a few things. Forgot to mention it." He nodded, unsuspecting, and went back to his paper. But as I busied myself in the kitchen, plating dinner, I felt the weight of the lie settling on my shoulders like an unwelcome shawl. Our life had always been steady, like the rhythm of the grandfather clock in the hall. Tick-tock. Day in, day out.
Tom and I met in college, back when bell-bottoms were in fashion, and life felt full of endless possibilities. He was studying engineering. I was in education, dreaming of teaching little ones their ABCs. We married young, built this home in the quiet suburbs of Maplewood, where the trees turned gold in the fall and neighbors waved from their porches. Tom worked his way up at the construction firm downtown, becoming a project manager with a steady paycheck that kept the roof over our heads and vacations to the lake every summer. I taught third grade for 20 years before retiring early to focus on the family. Lily came first, our miracle after 2 miscarriages that left scars on my heart I never spoke of. She was bright, artistic, always sketching in her notebooks or losing herself in books. Then Mike, our surprise baby, energetic and athletic, the one who kept us laughing with his endless jokes. Mornings were my favorite. The kitchen alive with the sizzle of bacon, the rich aroma of coffee brewing. Tom would kiss me on the cheek before heading out, his aftershave lingering like a promise. "Have a good day, love," he'd say, his voice deep and reassuring. Lily would rush in, hair tousled, grabbing a piece of toast on her way to classes at the community college where she was studying graphic design. "Bye, Mom. Love you." Mike would follow, backpack slung over one shoulder, mumbling about soccer practice. Evenings brought us together around the dinner table, sharing stories from the day. Tom would talk about the latest build, his hands gesturing as he described the framework coming together. Lily would show us her latest drawing, her eyes lighting up when we praised her talent. Mike would tease her about her artsy-fartsy ways, and we'd all laugh, the sound filling the room like sunlight. But looking back, there were cracks, small ones I hadn't noticed, or maybe chose not to. Tom had been working later hours the past few months, blaming it on a big project at the firm. "Deadlines, you know how it is," he'd say, rubbing his temples. His phone would buzz more often during dinner, and he'd step away to answer, his voice low in the hall. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? 30 years of marriage built on that foundation. Lily, too, had changed, subtly. She used to confide in me about everything, boyfriends, dreams, fears. But lately, she'd been quieter, spending more time in her room, her sketches darker, more abstract. When I'd ask, she'd smile faintly. "Just stressed with school, Mom." And Tom and Lily, they'd had a few sharp words here and there. Nothing major, just the usual parent-child friction. Or so I thought. That night, as I lay in bed beside Tom, listening to his even breathing, I stared at the ceiling, the shadows from the street lamp dancing like unspoken truths. Why didn't she want him to know? What was she protecting or hiding? The questions gnawed at me, but I pushed them down, telling myself it was the shock talking. Tomorrow I'd visit her again, get the full story. Little did I know that whisper was the first thread unraveling the fabric of our life. The next morning, I woke to the soft clink of Tom's coffee mug on the counter, the familiar sound pulling me from a restless sleep. The kitchen smelled of brewed coffee, bitter and grounding, and sunlight streamed through the window, catching the dust motes in the air. Tom was already dressed for work, his tie neatly knotted, his briefcase by the door. He looked up as I shuffled in, my robe tied loosely around me. "Morning, Sarah," he said, his voice warm but distracted. He was scrolling through his phone, his thumb moving too quickly for a casual glance. "Sleep okay?" "Like a rock," I lied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. The mug was warm in my hands, but it did little to ease the chill that had settled in my chest since Lily's whisper. I wanted to ask him if he'd noticed anything off with her lately, but her plea stopped me. "Don't tell Dad." Instead, I said, "You're heading out early today." "Yeah, big meeting with the contractors. Gotta make sure the project's on track. I'll be home for dinner, though." You making that chicken casserole?
I nodded, forcing a smile. Wouldn't miss it. He kissed my forehead, his lips quick and familiar, and then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood there listening to the silence of the house, the grandfather clock ticking in the hall. Mike was still asleep upstairs, his soccer practice not until noon. The quiet gave me too much space to think. I drove back to the hospital, the morning air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. The trees along the road were ablaze with red and gold, a reminder that fall was settling in, bringing change whether I wanted it or not. At the hospital, Lily was sitting up in bed, looking a little less pale. The bandage on her forehead was smaller now, and she was sipping water through a straw. When she saw me, her smile was cautious, like she was testing the waters. "Hey, Mom," she said softly, setting the cup down. "You didn't tell him, right?" I pulled a chair close to her bed, the legs scraping against the linoleum floor. "No, sweetheart, I promised I wouldn't. But Lily, you've got to tell me what's going on. Why can't your father know you're here?" She looked down at her hands, picking at the edge of the hospital blanket. Her nails, usually painted bright colors, were bare and bitten down. "It's complicated," she said finally, her voice so low I had to lean in to hear. "I just need a little time, okay? I'll explain soon, I promise." Her eyes met mine, pleading, and I felt that familiar tug of a mother's love, the kind that wants to fix everything but knows some things can't be rushed. "All right," I said, squeezing her hand. "But Lily, you're scaring me. This isn't like you." She nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I know, I'm sorry. It's just, I messed up, Mom, and I don't want him to be disappointed in me." "Disappointed?" I frowned, leaning back. "Your father loves you. Whatever it is, we can work through it together. You know that." She didn't answer, just looked out the window, where the parking lot shimmered under the morning sun. I wanted to push, to demand answers, but the fragility in her posture stopped me. Instead, I changed the subject, asking about her classes, her job at the bookstore. She answered in short bursts, her usual spark dimmed. When the nurse came to check her vitals, I stepped into the hall, pulling out my phone to text Mike a reminder about his practice. That's when I saw it. A missed call from a number I didn't recognize. No voicemail left. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I stayed with Lily until the afternoon, helping her eat the bland hospital lunch, joking lightly about the jello that wobbled on her tray. She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. When I left, promising to return that evening, I felt like I was carrying a stone in my pocket, heavy with unspoken truths. Back home, I threw myself into routine to keep the worry at bay. I vacuumed the living room, the hum of the machine drowning out my thoughts. I chopped vegetables for the casserole, the rhythmic thwack of the knife against the cutting board, a small comfort. But as I slid the dish into the oven, the phone rang. It was the same unknown number from earlier. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" My voice was cautious, expecting a telemarketer or a wrong number. "Mrs. Harlan?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar but professional. "This is Dr. Ellis from Maplewood Medical. I'm calling about your daughter Lily. She's been discharged, but I wanted to make sure you're aware of her follow-up care instructions." Discharged? I was just with her a couple of hours ago. She didn't mention anything about being discharged. There was a pause, a rustle of papers. "She was cleared around 2 p.m. She signed the paperwork herself. I assumed you knew." My mind raced. Why would Lily leave without telling me? Where would she go? I thanked the doctor, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my throat, and hung up. I called Lily's phone immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. "Lily, it's Mom. Where are you? Call me back, please." I paced the kitchen,
the smell of the casserole now cloying instead of comforting. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Lily had never been secretive, not like this. The accident, her plea to keep it from Tom, now this sudden disappearance. It was like a puzzle with missing pieces, and I was fumbling in the dark to find them. When Mike came downstairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes, I tried to keep my tone light. "Hey, have you heard from your sister today?" He shrugged, grabbing a soda from the fridge. "Nah, not since yesterday. She's probably at work or something." I nodded, not wanting to worry him, but my mind was spinning. As I set the table for dinner, I kept glancing at my phone, willing it to ring. Tom came home right on time, his tie loosened, his smile tired but genuine. "Smells amazing, Sarah," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. He didn't notice the tension in my shoulders, the way my hands shook slightly as I served the food. Dinner was quiet, Mike filling the silence with talk about his soccer game. Tom nodded along, but I caught him checking his phone under the table, his brow furrowing briefly before he set it face down. It was a small thing, but it landed like a pebble in a still pond, rippling through my thoughts. Was he hiding something too? As I cleared the plates, the weight of Lily's secret pressed harder. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she was hiding was tied to Tom, to that whispered plea in the hospital room, and I knew, deep down, that the truth was closer than I wanted it to be. That evening after dinner, I couldn't sit still. Tom had retreated to his study, claiming he had emails to catch up on. The door closed with a soft click that echoed in my mind. Mike was upstairs, music thumping faintly through the floor. I paced the living room, the carpet soft under my bare feet, but it offered no comfort. Lily's phone still went to voicemail, each unanswered ring twisting the knot in my stomach tighter. I decided to drive to her apartment, a small one-bedroom above the bookstore where she worked. The streets were quiet, streetlights casting long shadows that danced like ghosts in the wind. When I arrived, her car was parked out front, the dent from the accident fresh and jagged on the driver's side door. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by a surge of frustration. Why hide from me? I knocked, the sound sharp in the still night. Footsteps approached, hesitant, and then the door cracked open. Lily stood there, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, a bruise blooming purple on her cheek. "Mom, what are you doing here?" You left the hospital without telling me. I was worried sick. Can I come in?" She stepped aside, and I entered the familiar space. Bookshelves crammed with novels and sketch pads, the faint scent of lavender from her favorite candle. But tonight, it felt different, cluttered with unspoken words. She closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed like a shield. "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "I just needed to get out of there. Hospitals make me claustrophobic." I sat on the edge of her couch, the cushions sagging under me. "Lily, this isn't about the hospital. It's about whatever you're not telling me and why you don't want your father to know." She sighed, sinking into the armchair across from me. Her hands fidgeted with a loose thread on her sleeve. "It's nothing big, Mom, really. I borrowed some money from Dad a while back for school stuff, and I haven't paid it back yet. If he finds out about the accident, he'll worry, and it'll come up, and I don't want to disappoint him." The explanation fell flat, like a note out of tune in a familiar song. Tom had mentioned lending her money months ago, but he'd brushed it off as no big deal. "That's it? Money? Lily, we can figure that out. But sneaking out like this, it's not like you." She nodded, quickly, too quickly. "Yeah, that's it, promise. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? I'm just tired." I wanted to believe her, to wrap her in a hug and go home to my own bed. But as I stood to leave, I noticed her phone on the coffee table, screen lighting up with the text. I caught a glimpse before she snatched it away. "We need to talk. Kay." Who was Kay? She hadn't mentioned a new boyfriend. Driving home, the roads empty and dark, doubt crept in like fog rolling off the river. Lily had always been open, her emotions worn like a favorite sweater. This secrecy felt foreign, forced. And Tom, his late nights, the phone checks, were they connected? I shook my head, chiding myself. Paranoia, that's all it was. The accident had shaken me more than I realized. The next few days blurred into a tense routine. Lily called, as promised, her voice brighter over the phone, but she avoided coming home for dinner, citing work shifts. Tom seemed normal, but I watched him closer now. The way he'd linger in the garage after work, talking on his phone in hushed tones. Just the boss, he'd say when I asked. But his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Then came the first real clue. Small, but sharp, like a splinter under the skin. It was a Saturday morning, the house filled with the aroma of pancakes bubbling on the griddle. Mike was at a friend's, and Tom was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, left unattended for once. I glanced at it, telling myself it was nothing, but the preview message stopped me cold. Can't wait to see you tonight. Miss you. Karen. Karen? My heart stuttered. Karen was Tom's assistant at the firm. A young woman in her 30s, efficient and polite the few times I'd met her at company picnics. She had always seemed professional. But now, I stared at the screen until it went dark, my hands trembling as I flipped the pancakes, the spatula scraping against the pan. When Tom came down, towel drying his hair, I kept my voice even. Your phone buzzed. Something from work? He picked it up, glancing at the message without a flicker of guilt. Yeah, probably about the project deadline. Thanks.
He kissed my cheek and sat down to eat, chatting about the weather forecast for rain. But I barely heard him, my mind racing. Was this the secret? An affair? It seemed too cliché, too painful to consider after all these years. But Lily's plea echoed, "Don't tell Dad." Did she know? Had she found out somehow and the accident was tied to it? I spent the afternoon in the garden, pulling weeds with more force than necessary, the earth cool and damp under my fingers. The physical work helped, but the suspicion festered. That evening, Tom said he had to go back to the office for a late meeting. "Won't be long," he promised, grabbing his keys. As his car pulled away, I sat in the quiet house, the clock ticking relentlessly. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I drove to Lily's apartment again, my resolve hardening with each mile. She answered the door in pajamas, surprise etching her features. "Mom, twice in a week? Everything okay?" I stepped inside without invitation. "No, it's not. I saw a message on your father's phone today, from Karen, his assistant." Her face paled and she sank onto the couch. "Mom!" "Tell me the truth, Lily. All of it. Does this have something to do with why you didn't want him to know about the hospital?" She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. When she looked up, tears glistened in her eyes. "I didn't want you to find out like this. It's not what you think, or maybe it is. Dad and Karen, they've been seeing each other. For months." The words hit like a punch, stealing my breath. I sat beside her, the room spinning slightly. "How did you know?" She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I saw them, a few weeks ago, at the coffee shop near my work. They were holding hands, laughing. I confronted him later, and he admitted it, said it was a mistake, that he was going to end it. But then the accident happened. I was distracted, thinking about it all, and that's why I swerved. I didn't want him to know I was hurt because it would force everything out in the open, and I didn't want to be the one to break your heart. I pulled her into my arms, her sobs muffled against my shoulder. The betrayal settled over me like a heavy blanket. But in that moment, holding my daughter, anger mixed with a fierce protectiveness. Tom, my Tom, with another woman. How had I missed the signs? We talked late into the night, Lily spilling details she'd kept bottled up, the late nights he'd blamed on work, the weekends away for conferences. Karen was divorced, no kids, and apparently she'd been the one pursuing him at first. Tom had sworn to Lily it was over, but the message I had seen said otherwise. As I drove home under the starry sky, resolve hardened in my chest. I wouldn't confront him yet.
Not until I had proof, something solid to stand on. But the suspicion had bloomed into certainty, and I knew our life was about to change. The days that followed were a haze of quiet agony, each moment stretched thin like dough pulled too far. I moved through the house like a ghost, performing the rituals of daily life, washing dishes until my hands pruned, folding laundry with mechanical precision, the fresh scent of detergent doing nothing to cleanse the bitterness in my heart. Tom noticed, of course. "You seem off, Sarah," he'd say over breakfast, his fork pausing midair. "Everything all right?" I'd nod, forcing a smile that felt like cracked porcelain. "Just a headache. It'll pass." But it didn't. The knowledge Lily had shared burned inside me, a slow ember that threatened to ignite everything we'd built.
I needed proof, something tangible to confront him with. Because doubt, even now, whispered that maybe Lily was mistaken. Maybe the message was innocent, the coffee shop sighting a misunderstanding. So I started small, careful not to tip my hand. One afternoon, while Tom was at work, I went into his study. The room smelled of his cologne and old books, a space that had always felt like his sanctuary. His desk was tidy, papers stacked neatly, but in the bottom drawer, under a folder of invoices, I found a small envelope. Inside were receipts, dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together, a hotel charge from a weekend he'd claimed was a business trip to the city. My fingers trembled as I photographed them with my phone, the click of the camera app sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Then his laptop, left unlocked, as he often did at home. I hesitated, my heart thudding, but opened his email. There, in a folder labeled Work Misc, were messages from Karen. Not overt, but intimate. References to last night, a shared joke about a client, signed with Love, K. One from just a week ago. "Can't stop thinking about you. When can we meet again?" I closed the laptop softly, feeling a wave of nausea. It was real. 30 years, 2 children, a life woven together like threads in a quilt, and he was unraveling it for what? A thrill? Boredom? I sat there in his chair, staring at the family photo on the desk. Us at the lake last summer, smiles wide and genuine. Tears came then, hot and silent, tracing paths down my cheeks. That evening, Lily came over unannounced, her knock tentative. She found me in the kitchen, stirring soup that simmered on the stove, the steam rising like unspoken accusations. "Mom," she said, hugging me from behind, "how are you holding up?" I turned, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "I found emails, receipts. It's true. All of it." She nodded, her own eyes red-rimmed. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner." We sat at the table, the wood cool under my palms, and talked in whispers, even though we were alone. "Why didn't you?" I asked, not accusing, just needing to understand. She thought he'd end it like he promised, and I didn't want to hurt you. You're always the strong one, holding us together. But seeing you now, I was wrong. Her words pierced me, but they also kindled something, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. "We need to tell Mike, but first I have to confront your father. Alone." Lily squeezed my hand. "What about me? The accident. I was so upset after seeing them that I wasn't paying attention. That's why I crashed, and why I didn't want him to know. It would have forced everything out." I pulled her close, smelling the faint vanilla of her shampoo. "You were protecting me, but no more secrets, okay?" She agreed, and we spent the rest of the afternoon planning, not revenge, but truth. I wouldn't scream or throw things, that wasn't me. I'd face him with the dignity he'd forgotten. Tom came home late that night, the garage door rumbling open as rain pattered against the windows. He shook off his coat,
water droplets scattering like tiny accusations. "Rough day," he muttered, loosening his tie. Traffic was a nightmare. I was waiting in the living room, the lamp casting a soft glow that did little to warm the chill in the air. "Tom, we need to talk." He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "About what?" I held up my phone, showing the photo of the receipt. "About this and Karen." The color drained from his face, and he sank into the armchair, rubbing his temples. "Sarah, how did you—" "I told you. Lily told me, and I found the rest." He looked up, shock mixing with guilt. "Lily knows? God, I never wanted—" "Wanted what? For us to find out? How long, Tom? How long have you been lying to me?"
He sighed, heavy and defeated. 6 months. It started as nothing, a drink after work. She listened, made me feel young again. But it was a mistake. I tried to end it. The emails say otherwise. I sat across from him, our knees almost touching, but a chasm between us. Why? Was I not enough? His eyes met mine, filled with regret. "No, Sarah, you're everything. I was stupid, stressed at work, feeling old. It wasn't about you. But it affects me. Us. The kids." Tears threatened again, but I blinked them back. "Do you love her?" He shook his head vehemently. "No. It was infatuation, escape. I love you. Always have." The words hung there, and part of me wanted to believe them, to bridge the gap with forgiveness. But betrayal isn't mended in a night. "I need time," I said finally, "and you need to tell Mike tomorrow." He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "Whatever you want. I'll do anything to fix this." As he headed upstairs, the stairs creaking under his weight, I stayed in the chair listening to the rain. The discovery had shattered the illusion, but in the shards I saw my own strength reflected back. The morning after the confrontation dawned gray and heavy, the sky outside our bedroom window thick with clouds that mirrored the fog in my mind. I woke up early, before the alarm, lying there beside Tom as he slept, his breathing steady and untroubled. How could he rest so easily? I slipped out of bed, my feet cold on the hardwood floor, and padded downstairs to the kitchen. The coffee maker gurgled to life, the rich aroma filling the air. But it tasted bitter on my tongue, like ashes. I sat at the table, cradling the mug, staring at the faint ring stains from years of family breakfasts. What now? Divorce? Counseling? The word affair echoed in my head, sharp and unforgiving. I'd always prided myself on our marriage. Solid, enduring, the kind others envied. But now it felt like a house of cards, one gust away from collapse. Tom came down an hour later, his face drawn, eyes shadowed from what I assumed was a sleepless night after all. He poured himself coffee, the liquid steaming as he sat across from me. "Sarah," he started, his voice rough, "about last night." "Not yet," I interrupted. Gently, but firmly. "Mike will be up soon. We tell him together, like we agreed." He nodded, stirring his coffee unnecessarily, the spoon clinking against the ceramic. "And after? What do you want me to do?" I met his gaze, seeing the man I'd loved for decades, but also the stranger who'd betrayed that love. "I need space, Tom. You should stay at a hotel for a while. Give me time to think." His shoulders sagged, but he didn't argue. "If that's what you need, I'll pack a bag." Breakfast was tense, the usual chatter absent. Mike sensed it immediately, his fork hovering over his eggs. "What's going on? You two look like someone died." Tom cleared his throat, glancing at me for permission. I nodded. "Son,
Your mom and we've hit a rough patch. I've made a mistake. An affair with someone from work. We're working through it, but I will be staying elsewhere for a bit." Mike's face went slack, then flushed with anger. "What? Dad, how could you?" He pushed back from the table, chair scraping harshly. "Mom, are you okay?" I reached for his hand, squeezing it. "I'm hurt, but I'll be all right. We all will, somehow." He stormed upstairs, slamming his door, the sound reverberating through the house. Tom stood to follow, but I shook my head. Give him time, like I need. By noon, Tom had packed a suitcase. The zippers rasp like a finality. He stood in the doorway, keys in hand. "I love you, Sarah. I'll call later if that's okay." "Just go," I said, my voice steady. As his car backed out of the driveway, a weight lifted, replaced by a hollow ache. Alone in the house, I called Lily. "It's done. He's gone for now." "Oh, Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm coming over." She arrived within an hour, arms laden with takeout from our favorite Chinese place, the one with the crispy egg rolls we used to share on movie nights. We ate in the living room, cross-legged, on the floor, like when she was a teen, the cartons steaming between us. "What are you going to do?" she asked, dipping a roll in sauce. "I don't know yet," I admitted, the food warm but settling uneasily. Part of me wants to end it, start fresh. Another part remembers the good years. She nodded, thoughtful. "You deserve better, but whatever you choose, Mike and I are here." That afternoon, we went for a walk in the neighborhood park. The leaves crunching under our feet, a crisp autumn breeze carrying the scent of wood smoke. It felt good to move, to let the fresh air clear my head. "I think I need to talk to a lawyer," I said finally, as we sat on a bench overlooking the pound. Lily squeezed my arm. "Smart. And maybe a therapist? For all of us." The idea settled right. No dramatic revenge, no slashing tires or public shaming. That wasn't my way. Instead, quiet steps towards healing, protecting what mattered, my children, my peace. The next day, I made calls. First, a family lawyer recommended by a friend, her office in a quiet building downtown. Sitting in her waiting room, surrounded by muted grays and potted plants, I flipped through a magazine without seeing the pages. When she called me in, her handshake firm, I laid it out. The affair, the evidence, our assets. She said, "You have options," her pen scratching notes. "Separation, divorce, we can protect your share of the house, retirement, but think about what you want long term." I left with pamphlets and a sense of control, small, but growing. Next, a therapist's appointment booked for the following week. Back home, I sorted through our finances, pulling bank statements from the file cabinet, the papers rustling like dry leaves. There were unexplained withdrawals, small amounts that now made sense as dinners, gifts. It stung, but knowledge was power. Tom called that evening, his voice tentative over the line. "How are you?" "Angry?" "Hurt, but managing." I paused, the phone cord twisting in my fingers. "I've seen a lawyer." "I understand. I ended things with Karen today. For good. Told her it's over. No contact." Words, Tom. I need actions. We talked briefly about logistics, bills, when he'd pick up more clothes. It was civil, but distant, like negotiating with a stranger. Mike came around slowly, joining Lily and me for dinner a few nights later. We cooked together, the kitchen filled with the sizzle of stir-fry, laughter tentative but real as they teased each other about chopping skills. "Dad called me," Mike said later, as we cleared plates. "Said he's sorry, wants to make it right." I nodded, stacking dishes in the sink, water running hot over my hands. We'll see. In the quiet moments, alone in bed, doubt crept in. Had I been blind? Neglectful? But I pushed it away, focusing on small acts of self-care. A long bath with lavender oil, the water soothing my tense muscles. Reading a book I'd set aside years ago, the pages turning like steps forward. A week in, I invited friends over, women from my old teaching days. We sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the chill, sipping tea that steamed in the evening air. I told them everything, my voice steady. Their support was a balm. Hugs, shared stories of their own heartaches. "You're strong, Sarah," one said, her hand on mine. "You'll come through this." And slowly, I started to believe it. The action wasn't grand, but it was mine. Reclaiming my life, one deliberate choice at a time. Word spread slowly, like ripples in a pond after a stone's been thrown. In a town like Maplewood, where everyone knew everyone else's business, it was inevitable. First, it was the whispers at the grocery store. The cashier, a woman I'd known since she was in my third-grade class, giving me a sympathetic look as she scanned my items. "Heard about Tom," she said softly, bagging the bread with extra care. "If you need anything—" I nodded, keeping my chin up, the fluorescent lights overhead humming like judgmental bees. "Thank you. We're managing." But inside, the humiliation burned, a quiet fire that made my cheeks flush. Then came the calls from friends, their voices laced with concern and a hint of curiosity. "Sarah, is it true? Tom and that assistant? I can't believe it." I confirmed it briefly, not diving into details, the weight of their pity pressing down like an unwelcomed hand on my shoulder. At church that Sunday, the stares were more overt. We hadn't been regulars lately, but I'd gone alone, seeking solace in the familiar hymns and stained glass light filtering through the windows. The pastor pulled me aside after the service, his hand warm on my arm. "If you need to talk, my door's open." I thanked him, but the congregation's murmurs followed me out the door, a chorus of speculation. The real fallout hit at Tom's work. He'd confided in me during one of our tense phone calls that rumors were swirling at the firm. Karen apparently hadn't taken the breakup well. Tears in the break room? Sharp words in meetings? The HR department got involved when a colleague reported the affair, citing company policy on fraternization. Tom was called into a meeting with his boss, the air thick with disappointment. He told me about it later, over coffee at a neutral cafe downtown, the espresso machine hissing in the background. We sat at a corner table, away from prying eyes, the steam from our cups rising between us like a barrier. "They put me on probation," he said, his voice low, fingers tracing the rim of his mug. "Said it affects team morale. Karen's transferring departments." I sipped my latte, the foam creamy on my lips, and felt a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. "It's consequences, Tom. Actions have them." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I know. I deserve it. But Sarah, I miss home. Miss you."
The words tugged at me, but I held firm. Missing isn't enough. You need to show change. In the community, the ripple reached our extended family. Tom's sister, Elaine, called from out of state, her tone sharp with disapproval. "What was he thinking?" she demanded, the phone pressed to my ear as I paced the living room. "You tell him he's an idiot from me." I laughed despite myself, a small release, the sound echoing off the walls. My own sister, closer by, came over with a casserole and a bottle of wine. We sat on the back porch as dusk fell,
the air cooling, crickets chirping in the grass. "People are talking," she said, pouring us each a glass, the red liquid swirling. "But they're on your side, Sarah. No one blames you." I clinked my glass to hers, the chime soft. "It's not about sides, it's about what happened." Mike faced it at school. Whispers in the hallways, a teammate asking bluntly during practice. He came home red-faced, slamming his backpack down. "Everyone knows, Mom, it's embarrassing." I hugged him, feeling his tense shoulders relax slightly. "I'm sorry, honey, but hold your head high. This is your father's mistake, not yours." Lily bore it with quiet grace, but I saw the toll. Friends at work giving her pitying looks, a customer at the bookstore mentioning it casually. She confided one evening as we baked cookies in the kitchen, the oven's warmth filling the room with the scent of chocolate. A girl I know asked if it was true, said her mom works with Karen. I dusted flour from my hands, the powder floating like snow. And what did she say? That it's family business. She smiled faintly, pressing dough onto the sheet. But it hurts seeing Dad like this. The public unraveling culminated at the annual neighborhood block party, a tradition we'd helped start years ago. I debated going, but Lily convinced me. "Show them you're strong," she said, linking her arm with mine as we walked down the street carrying a tray of brownies. The party was in full swing, grills smoking with burgers, laughter mingling with music from a portable speaker. Heads turned as we arrived, conversations dipping briefly. Tom wasn't there, of course. He'd kept a low profile at a motel on the edge of town. A few neighbors approached, offering hugs and words of support. "You're better off," one whispered, but I shook my head. "No cruelty. He's still the father of my children." As the evening wore on, the initial awkwardness faded. Kids ran around with sparklers, their laughter light and free. I chatted with old friends, the fire pit crackling warmly, sparks dancing into the night sky. It wasn't vindication, but a quiet justice. The community seeing me not as a victim, but as resilient. Tom felt the isolation keenly. He mentioned it in therapy. We'd started joint sessions, the counselor's office neutral ground with plush chairs and tissues on the table. "Friends aren't calling back," he admitted during one session, his hands clasped tightly. "I see now how much I've lost." The therapist nodded, her pen poised. Consequences build awareness. Driving home from that session, the radio playing softly, I glanced at Tom in the passenger seat. His profile was etched with regret, lines deeper than I remembered. Justice wasn't cruel, it was the mirror he needed to face. Months passed like pages turning in a book I wasn't sure I wanted to finish. Winter came to Maplewood, blanketing the streets in snow that muffled the world, much like the quiet that had settled over my heart. The house felt larger without Tom, echoes in the hallways where laughter used to bounce. But in that space, I found room to breathe, to rediscover pieces of myself I'd set aside for the sake of family. I threw myself into small projects, repainting the guest room a soft blue, the brush strokes rhythmic and therapeutic, the scent of fresh paint a promise of new beginnings. I joined a book club at the library, surrounded by women with stories of their own, our discussions over tea warming more than our hands. Laughter came easier there, genuine and light, reminding me that joy wasn't tied to one person. Therapy helped, those weekly sessions where I unpacked the hurt like old clothes from a trunk. The counselor, with her gentle prompts, guided me to see the affair not as my failure, but as Tom's choice. "You built a life," she said one afternoon, sunlight slanting through the blinds. "Now rebuild it on your terms." I cried often in that room, tissues crumpling in my fist, but each tear shed lightened the load. The kids were my anchors. Lily moved back home temporarily, her presence a comfort as we cooked meals together, the kitchen filled with the sizzle of onions and shared confidences. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said one night as we washed dishes side by side, suds bubbling in the sink. "You're handling this with grace." Mike, too, softened. He started opening up during our evening walks, the crunch of snow under our boots punctuating his words. "I was mad at Dad, but I miss him," he admitted, breath fogging in the cold air. We talked about forgiveness, not as erasure, but as release. "It's okay to love him and be hurt," I told him, linking my arm with his. "Emotions aren't either or." Tom and I met regularly, first in therapy, then over neutral ground, like park benches or quiet diners. He showed change, quitting the firm for a less stressful job at a smaller company, attending his own counseling sessions. "I see now how selfish I was," he said during one walk, leaves skittering across the path. "I took our life for granted." No grand gestures, just consistent effort, helping with house repairs from afar, sending thoughtful texts about the kids' milestones. Karen faded into the background. From what Tom shared, she'd moved on, transferring out of state. No drama, just the quiet end of something that should never have started. I didn't harbor hate, pity perhaps, for a woman who sought love in borrowed places. Spring arrived tentatively, buds unfurling on the trees like hesitant hopes. I filed for separation, not divorce, a step toward clarity, the lawyer's office now familiar. "It's about protecting yourself," she said, papers rustling as I signed. The act felt empowering, a reclaiming of agency. One evening, as daffodils poked through the thawing earth, Tom came over for dinner at the kids' invitation. We sat around the table, the roast chicken golden and fragrant, conversation flowing cautiously at first, then warmer. Laughter returned, tentative but real, when Mike cracked a joke about Tom's new job. Tom caught my eye across the table, a silent question in his gaze. I smiled faintly. Not a promise, but an opening. Healing wasn't linear. Some days anger resurfaced like weeds in the garden, and I'd pull them out with fierce determination. But more often, peace settled in, the kind born from acceptance. I took up painting, inspired by Lily's sketches, the canvas absorbing colors that mirrored my evolving emotions. Friends noticed the change, commenting on my glow during coffee meetups, the steam from our mugs curling upward. In time, Tom moved back, but to the guest room, a trial with boundaries clear as the lines on a map. We dated, almost, rediscovering each other through walks and talks, the familiarity laced with newfound respect. "I won't take this for granted again," he whispered one night as we sat on the porch, stars pricking the sky. I believed him, not blindly, but with eyes wide open. Forgiveness came slowly, a bridge built brick by brick. Our family mended, scars visible, but strong, like kintsugi pottery repaired with gold. Lily pursued her art with renewed passion. Mike excelled in school. And I found strength I didn't know I had, a quiet resilience that carried me forward. Life wasn't perfect. Echoes of betrayal lingered in quiet moments. But in the rebuilding, I discovered that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about growing beyond the pain, emerging whole. Looking back now, as the seasons have turned full circle, I see how that whispered plea in the hospital room was the crack that let the light in, or perhaps the darkness out. Life has a way of testing us, doesn't it? Not with grand battles, but with quiet betrayals that force us to choose who we'll become. I chose strength, not out of anger, but out of love. For my children, for the woman I am beyond being a wife. Tom and I are navigating this new chapter together, cautiously, with more honesty than we've had in years. It's not the fairy tale ending some might hope for, but it's real. grounded in forgiveness that's earned, not given freely. The lesson here, if there's one to share, is that secrets have a weight, and carrying them alone only bends us further. Trust, once broken, can be mended, but it takes time, like healing a wound that leaves a scar. A reminder, not a ruin. My family is closer now, our bonds forged in the fire of truth. Lily's art flourishes, Mike's confidence grows, and I've found joy in the simple things. A morning coffee alone, watching the sun rise over the garden, knowing I'm enough,